Recording, so we can go ahead and get started.
Wonderful. Well, welcome everybody. Today is the June 17th meeting of the Oregon Criminal Justice Commission. My name is Paul Solomon. I'm the chair of the commission, and we will begin by taking roll.
Commissioner Beach,
Present.
Commissioner Freeman,
I am here.
and Commissioner Harris. I know she is not here today. Commissioner McPherson,
Yes, here.
Commissioner Norton, Commissioner Perosa,
Present.
Commissioner Przonski, and Commissioner Lewis. So it looks like the only person that's not here yet that said they would be is Commissioner Norton.
Okay, well, hopefully she'll join us soon. I see that we had written public comments submitted. Did anybody sign up for live public comment?
No, we didn't have anyone sign up.
Did all of the commissioners get Jenny's email with the written comment from Lincoln County? See some nods. Yeah,
Yes.
great. Okay, well, let's go ahead and get started. But before we do, I just want to acknowledge our newest commission member, District Attorney Chris Perosa from Lane County, who is joining the commission today, and Holly Harris, who would be here today if she were not on vacation. Super excited about our new members, and I should also mention that I've had the opportunity to work pretty extensively with DA Perosa over the last few years, and am excited about his membership on the commission. Our first item on the agenda is the 2025-27 JRP formula funding table, and I think Lindsay is going to walk us through that.
Thanks, Chair Solomon. I'm just going to pull up the slides here. All right, can everybody see that?
Yes, and Jenny, it looks like Commissioner Norton's here, so we can get her on the roll for attendance.
I've got her recorded. Thank you.
Great.
Apologies all.
Oh, you are just fine.
Just in time. So good afternoon, Chair Solomon and commissioners. For the record, I am Lindsay Cullens, and I am the Justice Reinvestment Program Manager here at the CJC. Today, I'm asking the Commission to review and approve the JRP Formula Grant Funding Table, a competitive grant request cap for new applicants, and adjustment requests for Lincoln and Tillamook County. So we'll move right on into the JRP Formula Grant Funding. So this table is included in your materials ahead of today's meeting, and I fully acknowledge that this is very hard to read. It's also kind of tricky to present. So I would, if you can, look at your reference material. We can also kind of dive into it if you have any questions. But yeah, so we're showing the full 2025-27 JRP formula allocation in accordance with the formula used to distribute baseline funding from DOC and established in statute. The total formula grant amount for this biennium is just over $47 million, which breaks down into that program category, evaluation category, and victim services. Program is 87%, so about $40.9 million, 3% for evaluation, which is about $1.4 million, and 10% for victim services, which is a minimum number, but that minimum number breaks out to about $4.7 million. And so in this table, you'll see each county's award amount distributed across those three counties, as well as kind of their total distribution there, or allocation at the end. So at this point, we're requesting commission approval of the formula funding table so counties can begin incorporating these figures into their final applications. Pending questions, we do have a optional motion language slide on the next slide.
Chair, would a motion be in order?
Oh, no, I thought we were advancing to the next slide.
Oh.
Hold on. Lindsay, were you waiting for the next slide to come up?
Oh, no, I was waiting for any questions that might
Oh,
be.
okay.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I've got a quick question. So I know on some of our grants, we have a floor, but not with JRP.
We do. It's $100,000 for counties that don't meet that in the allocation. So we've already done that calculation.
Okay, but
Yep.
go ahead, but that's not reflected here. Because I see counties that have program funding of less than 100,000. Oh, I see it adds up with the evaluation and victim funding. Got
Right.
it.
Yes.
Got it. Okay. It's all clear to me now. Anybody else have any questions about the new funding table? Is there someone who would like to make a motion to approve the 25-27 JRP funding formula grant table?
Mr.
So
Chair,
moved. Ooh, go ahead,
Sorry.
Commissioner.
go ahead. I was just going to ask a question. Are we approving the grants or just the formula? And the reason I'm asking is sometimes we abstain because we represent
Yeah.
certain counties.
Right. Yeah, no, we're just approving the funding table and not the actual grants here.
Thank you. I'd be happy to second that.
Great. And Commissioner Beach, were you getting ready to make the motion?
I sure was. So moved, Chair, as you mentioned earlier, unless I need to specify again.
No, I think we are good. And Commissioner Freeman has seconded. So Jenny, if you'd be willing to take roll.
Yes. Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Great.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and move into the JRP competitive grant new applicant cap. So just as a little background and context, as a reminder, returning applicants already have essentially an approved cap. They can request up to 105% of their 2023-2025 award that was approved in the commission meeting in April 2025. So that prior award included both personnel and training and travel. Not all counties request it from both those categories, but we did not reduce the cap for previous applicants this biennium. We just allowed the whole thing to kind of be a part of that 105% request. So this ensures consistency and doesn't penalize counties that previously applied. Scenario-based reductions will be included in the final application budget sheet. And these help the GRC understand county priorities if funding must be reduced, and then make those recommendations to the commission. And so then any final cuts would be applied uniformly to eligible requests after caps are set. And then the question for today, based on commission feedback, again in that April 2025 meeting, where staff were basically asked, what happens to returning applicants' awards if new applicant numbers increases, and they did. So we have 21 potential applicants this biennium, up from 15 last biennium. So now that's brought this discussion of what do we do with new applicants since we've already kind of created a cap for previous applicants. So we're going to ask the commission today, how should we cap new applicants to preserve fairness and sustainability for all counties? And I'm going to go through some slides of some methodologies that staff have come up with and would like to present to you all for discussion and decision today.
Great.
Okay, so staff are presenting two methodologies, each with a max and average option. There's a total based, which compares new applicants to previous funding amounts. This is simpler, but doesn't account for differences in service levels. There's the peer based that uses service level population data from DOC to identify two peer counties for each new applicant from the 2023 and 2025 competitive grant awardees. Today, staff are asking the commission to first choose a method, so total based or peer based, and then pick whether to apply a max or average cap within that method. And so I'll walk through what those scenarios will mean for reductions in the next slides. I'll walk through first the total award based and what that looks like, and then the peer county based. Okay, so the total award base in this method, new applicants, again, are capped based on funding awarded to counties from last biennium, either the max plus 5% awarded or the average plus 5% of all county awards from last biennium. If all counties request their cap, according to these calculations, again, that, last biennium counties request that 105%. And then we use this max cap for new applicants, which would basically be the max request that was asked last biennium. That would mean a 46% reduction that would likely be required across the board. If we look at the average cap, so we take the average of all last biennium's awards, that would and give that average number to each new applicant county. That would require a 34% reduction across the board. So this method is easy to calculate, but is less tailored to scale. We'll go into the peer base and kind of talk through that too. We do have another slide kind of following that where it will talk about those percentages, and I'm happy to kind of maybe move back to the slide if we need to, this slide if we need to, but I think maybe seeing the peer base might be helpful. All right, so moving into the peer-based method, this is rooted in DOC population served data, so the same data that's used to determine grant and aid funding. So CJC matched each new applicant with the two existing counties, so the counties from the 23-25 biennium, with the closest supervision population data. So we use that data to basically determine the two closest counties and use that as their peer counties to make these calculations. So then we set caps. So those caps are then set based on those peer counties' award amounts. So again, we went with the max. So the max plus 5% or the average. So with the peer county kind of calculation, a max plus 5%, that would be a 32% reduction across the board, or the average, which would be a 28% reduction across the board. So the average would be the average of those two peer counties. And the max would be the max of those two peer counties.
Lindsay, when you say a 28 or 32% reduction across the board, would those reductions be made wholesale like that, or would it be based on the individual applications? How would you apply the reduction?
Right. So that kind of goes into how we would ask counties to build their budget sheets. So we'll have a budget sheet that asks them to build scenario reductions, essentially, of, once we have this number kind of finalized today, we can give it, more precise reduction-based scenarios to build towards. But then we ask counties to then say, hey, how would you like reductions to be made to your request? Would you want it to be bottom up? Say we have to do, I'll say 28%. They build a 25% scenario. There's going to be a 3% difference there if every county asks for their maximum request. And that's kind of what we're trying to allow for, is that we don't know the exact number yet. We just know the limit. So letting them kind of to at least inform, like, well, we would prefer 28% or 25% in this case of a scenario. You just take that from every line item that we list here. but they can choose that in that budget sheet. Or there's also the option to, kind of do it in priority of like, well, I want it to be from the bottom up. You take, percentage off. So getting to kind of prioritize what's important to the county and at least inform GRC so they can make recommendations to the commission.
Okay.
So just look at my notes really quickly. So I'll go ahead and move into the portion where we're kind of directing the conversation a little bit. We're asking for the commission's input here to direct the conversation. We want to know, would the commission like to move forward with the total based method or peer based method? And just to kind of say, this doesn't lock in someone's vote. We haven't gotten to the motion portion yet. It just kind of guides the conversation so we can then maybe move into max or average on the next slide.
Well, let's open this up for conversation. I will say that I find it, and I've said this before, I find it troubling that we seem to be a victim of our own success in that we get these grant-funded programs up and running. And as more counties participate, it comes at the expense of reductions for those programs that have already been up and running. And, at a certain point, I don't know how sustainable it becomes if we have to look at making such big reductions on programs like these. I think that's a more of a legislative issue, but it's one that we have and continue to run into. So I'm curious people's thoughts about the total based or peer based methodology.
Chair, my only concern is that that rural communities, I hate to say this, but without making it too impossibly like 69 lines of, figuring, rural communities are hit proportionally harder with any of these percentage reductions. So I want to call that piece out. And I guess for me, the average cap reductions I don't know. I'm kind of at a loss. I would also be interested in hearing the recommendation of the staff.
Well, if staff have recommendations, it'd be great. I'll share my thinking on this, and that is that we go with a peer-based model because it reduces the overall amount of reduction that counties would have to take. And I think using the average doesn't make sense. With the average, you'd be funding a Union County ostensibly at the same rate as a Multnomah County, or so it doesn't really take into account the size difference in the programs. Commissioner Beach.
Thank you, Chair. Just more of a clarifying question. So when you say DOC population served, and forgive me being a community justice director, you're referring to each percentage allocation of each county in receipt of community corrections grant and aid funds?
Lindsay, I'm assuming that's what that is the grant and aid formula.
Yes. So it's what DOC uses to determine grant and aid funding. That's what we basically use. So all the data that DOC uses to come up with their formula, we use that to establish peer counties.
Can you go back to the last slide, the peer-based? I think you can kind of see that a little more clearly. I guess you don't have the percentages up there. Okay.
Percentages, sorry, what percentages, Chair Solomon?
Oh, the DOC grant and aid formula percentages.
Right. So we didn't use the formula necessarily to determine this. We used the data that DOC uses to determine peer counties. So not how we're
Oh,
allocating it.
right.
Yep.
Right.
Not how we're
Right.
allocating it, just determining the two closest peer
Got it.
counties to a new applicant. Yep.
So, for example, a Clackamas County, you might have compared a Washington and a Marion
Right.
with them and average that to get the number, correct?
Correct. So for instance, Baker County, based on this DOC data, Baker County, we had the two peer counties as Crook and Wasco. And kind of went down through that. And it was all based on, again, that population served data from DOC.
So if you go back to the previous slide, if we use the other model, Baker County would be funded up to $900,000, which is much higher in proportion to the size of the county.
Correct.
Other thoughts, comments? Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. For the same reasons that you stated earlier, I agree with the peer award process.
Mhm.
Chair, if I may, Commissioner Beach.
Mhm.
So again, forgive me, Lindsay, I just want to make sure I understand. So you're talking about DOC population served. Are you referring to the incarcerated population in addition to community corrections, or just the community corrections that assists with determination of each county's allocation of formula grants? For instance, Yamhill County would be 2.17%. I just want to make sure I'm clear.
Right. So I'll read you kind of the data that we used from DOC that they used to determine their percentage. So individuals on local control, on post-prison supervision, on probation, on EDIS PPS, and on EDIS probation as measured from DOC. Yep. Does that answer your question?
It does. So for Yamhill County, I think what you're saying is it's based on the 2.17%.
But go ahead.
It's
Lindsay.
only, so there is no, we don't use the percentage to determine the competitive grant allocation. The only thing that we used was basically that data to determine population served, all of that information that would then make or that would then show us the two counties that have a close or the closest peer counties to population served, and then that's it. When it comes to the number amount, like the funding amount, we then only used the I'll go back to the slide here. We only then for number amount used the numbers that you see here. So for instance, Yamhill County's award amount, or in the case of Baker County, to determine that max, we looked at Crook County and Wasco County and which county had the max ask. For the average for Baker County, we took the average of Crook County and Wasco County because those are the two peer counties, but we did not use the allocation percentage for any of the math, just to determine the peer counties.
Thank you so much for clarifying.
Yeah, it's a great question. I know it's a lot to kind of present, so I appreciate the question.
You want to go to the next slide again, Lindsay?
Yes. So
Great. Go ahead.
So kind of wanted to turn it back over to you, Chair Solomon, of just where we kind of go from here, total based or peer based.
So if there aren't any other comments, I would entertain a motion. It sounds like we're leaning toward the peer base, but haven't heard from all commissioners. So if folks feel differently, now is the time to speak. Otherwise, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the peer base model.
And if I may, Chair
Go ahead.
Solomon,
Yes.
did you want to do a motion at both the decision points for total based and peer based and max and average, or all together?
I'm not sure I understand.
So for instance, we have this slide here for the methodology of we're doing peer based, but it sounds like you're offering the discussion for peer based with an
Mhm.
average cap reduction at 28%.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I do have motion language if that would be supportive, if you feel like we're at that place.
Well, I'll give folks another opportunity to chime in if they feel differently.
Chair, this is Commissioner Beach. I agree with that perspective, going with the peer-based
Mhm.
average cap reduction.
Great. All right, I'm not hearing any other discussion. So yes, if you have a motion language. So if someone would be willing to move to approve the staff-informed competitive grant request cap for new applicants specifically, do I need to
Be
read all
option
this?
4. It would be option 4.
You could, using option 4, cap new applicant request at the average amount of the new applicants, peer counties from the 23-25 biennium awardees.
Commissioner Beach, so moved.
Is there a second?
Commissioner McPherson, seconds.
All right, we have a motion by Commissioner Beach, seconded by Commissioner McPherson. Would you please take roll, Jenny?
Sure. Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
and Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Great. All right. Next up, Jenny, is the Lincoln and Tillamook County grant award adjustments.
All right, you're not done with me yet. So we'll go into the JRP adjustment requests for Lincoln County and Tillamook County. So commission approval for budget adjustment requests is required for 2 types of adjustments. First, if a county is requesting to reallocate 10% or more of its total grant award. And second, if the county is proposing to add, remove, or substantially change an existing program. And so these requests met this threshold, so we'll get into those. So for Lincoln County is requesting to reallocate a total of $144,598.24 within personnel, and $2,859.19 to travel and training. The primary change is to increase an existing parole and probation officer position from half-time to full-time, backdate it to Q6. This reflects a shift in duties and workload for that PPO position. And then the requested $2,800 or $2,859.19 transfer to travel and training will be used to train staff to meet program goals.
And so, Lindsay, this isn't a change in scope. This is just before us because of the 10% threshold, correct?
Correct.
Great. So go ahead.
We do have a couple more for Lincoln County, so I wanted to check in with you, Chair Solomon. Would you want to do motions for each request or all at the end?
Let's do each request because I think these may, be a little easier to do them one at a time.
Fair enough.
Great. So is someone, first, is there any discussion about this grant adjustment?
Chair, if I may, I think to your question, just a little clarification. I think Lindsay confirmed that there's no programmatic change here. I'm just curious if we know which program this is allotted to, prison diversion or otherwise.
It's formula. I don't know. It is for Lincoln County's formula funds, and I believe it's coming from two other positions that were doing kind of some of the JRP work, so other personnel positions, and coming from a program that was not as productive or fruitful as the county liked. So I know it's supporting housing, but then other JRP kind of components.
So there's a paragraph here in their award adjustment request. It says the program is required increased PPO staff time. This individual monitors participant progress supervision case plans, hold AOS accountable. Lincoln County would like to use formula funding to increase the PPO position from 0.5 to 1.0 to reflect the better actual time working the TIDES program and the needs of the participants. So I'm not sure what the TIDES program is, but I'm assuming it's one of their
Right.
It's their
prison
housing.
diversion
Their housing. Yeah.
through their housing. Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. Any other discussion on this one? Would someone be willing to make a motion to reallocate $144,598.24 from personnel and reallocate $2,859.19 to travel and training? And then I'm assuming, Lindsay, the balance would go to fully funding that PO position?
The 144,598
Oh, okay,
and
so-
the 20 would go to the
okay, got it,
increase. Yep, to the increase.
Okay. All right, I'm not going to restate that, but it's been clarified. Is someone willing to make that motion?
So moved, Commissioner Beach.
Is there a second?
Freeman, I'm happy to second it.
Great. We have a motion made by Commissioner Beach, seconded by Commissioner Freeman. Jenny, roll, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
All right, we'll move on to Lincoln County's last two requests, I believe. Just make sure. Yep. Okay, so Lincoln County is requesting to reallocate $29,846.81 to housing and facilities and $6,000 to supplies. These funds will support utilities for the county's TIDES housing units, and short-term housing supports, and new furniture for those units. The changes reflect a lower than expected demand for employment supports, which is where some of the funding is coming from, and increased utility and housing supply costs.
All right, any discussion? Is there someone willing to make a motion?
Also move. Oh,
okay.
Commissioner Norton, so moves.
Okay, great. Is there a second?
Commissioner McPherson seconds.
All right, motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner McPherson. Jenny, roll, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
All right, and lastly, for Lincoln County, under the county's competitive grant, they're requesting to reallocate $6,000 to travel and training. This funding will be used to train current staff on evidence-based downward departure practices, since the JRP dedicated DDA position is currently vacant and in recruitment.
Great. Any discussion? Someone be willing to make a motion to reallocate the $6,000 to travel and training?
Yes, Commissioner McPherson makes that motion.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Beach, yes.
All right, we have a motion made by Commissioner McPherson, seconded by Commissioner Beach. Jenny, roll please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
All right, and we already did that. So we'll move into Tillamook County. So Tillamook County is requesting to reallocate $30,000 to personnel to support staffing within their new criminal deputy field contact program. This is part of their broader effort in the county, in the county's community corrections. So while this program will exist as part of Tillamook County's corrections approach to field contacts, this also helps fill gaps in field contact capacity while the county navigates PPO staffing vacancies. Community corrections is currently relying on the criminal division to assist with these duties right now. So the funds are being reallocated from contractual services, specifically from a GPS contract that's currently underspent due to contracting issues.
All right, any discussion? Right, is someone willing to make a motion to reallocate $30,000 to personnel? Commissioner Norton.
Chair Solomon, sorry, I can't push buttons fast.
Hmm?
So
All
I
good.
couldn't get I just wanted to confirm that all of these, and I think it's something we need to discuss within ourselves, all of these would be within the goals of the JRP.
Current program scope, yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
believe
can
it.
see the True Narc machine, but I also, for me, I struggle a little bit with the fact that could also be a way to increase.
Yeah, I think that's a separate one that we'll take up in a minute.
Oh, sorry.
No,
I'm
no,
reading
no,
I'm
no
reading,
pro-
going back through my notes, so,
Yeah, no problem.
okay. So I would so move for this particular issue to reallocate the 30,000 to personnel.
Great. Is there a second?
Commissioner Beach, I'll second.
All right, we have a motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner Beach. Jenny, roll please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passed unanimously.
Great. All right. So we'll move ahead with the next request. So the public comment that the commission received is in relation to this next request. So Tillamook County requests to reallocate $12,000 in unspent JRP funds to contribute toward the purchase of a True Narc presumptive drug testing machine. This machine would support earlier identification and intervention in drug-related cases, particularly misdemeanors, with the aim of facilitating supervision, conditional discharge, or entry into specialty court when appropriate. The machine would be used across law enforcement agencies in Tillamook County to perform presumptive drug tests, primarily, again, in that misdemeanor level drug cases, though it may also be used in some felony cases. The county has indicated this tool may help address current barriers to timely case processing, particularly for DIM charges, where lab delays prevent early intervention. Tillamook described plans to track cases from initial testing through court disposition and supervision, including both standard supervision caseloads and behavioral health court when applicable. Individuals placed on supervision may receive assessments, case plans, and referrals to treatment or other services depending on need. The county also referenced a potential use in pre-sentence risk assessments to help evaluate eligibility for community supervision in presumptive prison cases. Importantly, the county is proposing to blend funding sources for this equipment purchase. While this adjustment request is only for the JRP portion, a separate funding request under the treatment court grant will be presented later on in this meeting. Tillamook will also use a third non-CJC grant funding source to contribute to this purchase to keep aligned with using JRP funds for JRP eligible programs.
All right, discussion. Commissioner Norton.
Yes, do we know if there's ongoing costs? I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with this piece of equipment. Is there ongoing costs associated with that, and how will those be covered?
As far as I know, Commissioner Norton, this is a one-time purchase.
Thank you.
Other comments? Commissioner McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I have the concerns that Commissioner Norton raised a few moments ago about this not really being within the scope of the funding for justice reinvestment dollars, and why the county would not simply use county funding to do this if that's what they chose to do. But it doesn't seem to be aligned with justice reinvestment to me.
You know, this issue has come up in the past too, and I know we've funded these machines with some controversy in the deflection program funding. And I suspect this is an issue that's going to continue to arise. I am wondering if staff could do some research on these machines and provide us kind of the best practices, because I know that TrueNarc specifically has been a tool that has been somewhat controversial. So I just want to flag that. I also have a little bit of an issue with, I guess we haven't provided precedence with JRP, unless you know of another program that's been funded, Lindsay, through JRP for TrueNarc.
I do not.
Okay. Commissioner Freeman.
Thank you, and I'm always glad to get more information and certainly don't mind that idea. The way I understood what I read in the written comments that were submitted is that this tool would be used to help get people into a situation where they, either going to be, prosecuted and or they get a choice to go to some sort of a treatment program. So I know, not every pathway into a treatment program is a deflection or somebody just self-presenting. We continue to see here at Douglas County an awful lot of the successful drug treatment program people that have been through them started in the criminal justice system. So I'm not opposed to using this as a tool, as described in the the written comments, to help hold people accountable and possibly get them to make a decision to seek and be successful in treatment. But I'm also okay to get the more information that you've asked for.
Mm-hmm. Great. Other comments? Commissioner Norton.
Yeah, I think the only thing I would add is that I would love to see them outline very clearly how this meets the goals of the JRP program when you're gathering more information. I'm inclined to wait as well.
I think the other issue that I have is that it would be used for felony prosecutions, which, isn't a name of JRP. I get the the utility in screening for people that are, might be eligible for downward departures or some type of diversionary programs. But I don't think we should be funding things that are used for felony prosecutions that are outside of the aims of JRP. Commissioner Beach.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, just I really like the idea of gathering some additional information about TrueNarc, and going back to Commissioner Norton's comment. I would be interested to know specifically, again, if there is any additional maintenance or required upgrades to this piece of equipment. Presumably, we see such change in our drugs that we see on the street, so it seems hard to believe that there wouldn't be some additional costs required for maintenance and, upgrades as our the drugs we see in the community continue to change. Just a comment there. And then just briefly, do we know, it doesn't sound like from the public comment, do we know if Tillamook has a CJC deflection grant and or program? It appears perhaps no.
They do not have a law enforcement led deflection program, but they are working on a different deflection pathway.
Thank you.
All right. It sounds like we've heard from a few people that would like to get more information about this before we move forward. So unless I hear something to the contrary at this point, I think we could move forward with and actually you didn't really go into detail about the 1,500, Lindsay. Is there anything else you want to say there?
Correct. So it's slightly different, kind of anticipating wanting to maybe break these up. So this is a separate adjustment request. So Tillamook County is also requesting a small reallocation of $1,500 within their supplies category to cover costs for bus passes. These funds are being shifted from the Tillamook Health Department Food Handlers Card Program, which is currently underspent. The bus program has been in high demand with consistent participation and trying to meet where the demand is.
Great. Any discussion on that item? Are you ready for a motion?
Yes, Chair Solomon.
All right. Is someone willing to make a motion to reallocate $1,500 within supplies?
So moved, Commissioner Norton.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Beach, yes, I'll second.
All right. We have a motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner Beach. Jenny, roll call, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
That passes unanimously.
Commissioner Beach, you have a comment?
Thank you, Chair. Forgive me if I could, going back to the previous TrueNarc discussion, just looking at the public comment, as the CJC staff is gathering information, if Tillamook County is able and has enough planning to share, I'd be interested in how they will ensure that the officers are not stopped by what cases they're using it for. So just how the funds will result in separation and disposition of certain cases, and how that'll be tracked. And I'm just referring directly to the public comment there.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
All right, and then moving to the last slide you'll see from me today. So Tillamook County is also requesting to reallocate $18,552.68 to victim services, specifically to support Tides of Change, their JRP funded community-based victim services provider. This funding is available due to vacancies in 2 PPO positions that are tied to JRP programming and have remained unfilled as of early 2025.
Okay, any discussion? Would someone like to make a motion to approve?
Commissioner Norton, so moves.
Is there a second?
Commissioner Beach, seconded.
Great. Motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner Beach to reallocate $18,552.68 to victim services for Tillamook County. Jenny, roll, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
Great. All right. So next up, I think we're going to hear from Adeline about the treatment court grant adjustment for Tillamook County.
It's true, you are.
Mhm.
Hello, everyone. For the record and for the new commissioners that I haven't met, my name is Adeline Padlina, and I'm the treatment court grant program coordinator. And Lindsay teed me up pretty well because I have the Tillamook Mental Health Court budget adjustment, and they are requesting $10,000 moved from contractual services to the equipment category for a portion of that TrueNarc machine, which you all requested. So as Lindsay said, they're requesting $12,000 from JRP, and then we'll be providing from a non-CJC funds anywhere from that additional $9,000 to $17,000 that would be required for the TrueNarc device. I do want to add a couple notes that I think might help with your discussion that you were having. So the reason why Tillamook is asking for this is that per their DA, drug charges can't be filed without a presumptive drug test. And so this TrueNarc device would provide those presumptive drug tests that could decrease costs and wait times for those tests through the traditional UA lab system. They did acknowledge the conversation that you all were having, that using this device could lead to the arrest and involvement in the criminal justice system. However, they did note that they would be focusing on using it as early intervention at earliest stages of someone's use or possession of drugs, and then did really highlight that it could be a quicker route to services oversight and accountability. And then most important for the treatment courts, of course, it could lead to detection and referral to that mental health court where substance use disorders are often secondary diagnoses.
Commissioner Norton.
Yes, I think my concern still arises. Is this consistent? I'm not as familiar with the mental health court grant program as I am JRP. So that would be my concern. And then I would want more information, just like before, on how this is consistent with the mental health court, their justification of how it's consistent with mental health court treatment goals.
Commissioner Freeman.
So again, I'm always happy to receive more information, but we have a very successful drug court program here at Douglas County. And matter of fact, our treatment courts are so successful, the decision was not to do the deflection program that some of the other counties are doing. The key, though, is to make sure to get people into the system and then to hold them accountable. These tools, even though they're expensive, really help with that accountability piece that helps get people on the right track and helps them get better from their addiction. So again, I'm not opposed to having good tools so that our specialty courts can be successful.
Commissioner Beach.
Thank you, Chair. I would follow the comments of Commissioner Freeman. I appreciate the discussion we had with regard to justice reinvestment, but I do understand the CJC treatment court grants to have a different purpose. And I personally believe that this request aligns with what the intent of this court would be. So I would support this request moving forward, but would still like to learn more about the equipment overall, especially with regard to our justice reinvestment reallocation request that's still pending.
Other discussion, comments? Okay, is this the only thing that we have for budget adjustment for Tillamook County on mental health court? Adeline?
Yes, this is the only thing from the treatment court program.
Okay. So I'm hearing some desire to approve this, even though we have held back on the JRP funding. So I would entertain a motion if someone wants to make it.
This is Freeman. I'll move to support the request.
Commissioner Beach, I'll second that.
Oh, sorry. Jenny, roll.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
No, for the same reasons I stated when we were talking about the JRP portion of this.
Commissioner Norton,
No, I concur with Commissioner McPherson.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
No. So where's that leave us? Is that split?
It does 3 noes and 3 yeses.
Okay, I'm gonna look to staff here to guide me in terms of process. I should probably know what the best course of action. Commissioner Norton, you have a comment?
Yeah, just for clarification, I'm not a no, a hard no. I'm a no for now until I have more information. So if we can table it and bring it back, I'm happy to reconsider.
Yeah. Unless I hear differently from staff, my sense is we don't have an approval. So we do have a request for staff to provide additional information. So I think at this point, we will table this unless I get staff guidance to the contrary.
Chair, if I may, I think the other thing you might entertain is whether or not you want to, I guess, formalize that decision, given the split.
Mhm. Yeah. So in formalizing that, I would direct staff to come back at the next meeting with additional information about the use, efficacy, cost of these devices. Commissioner Norton?
Yes, also how it feeds into the mission of both grant programs,
Mm-hmm.
and then ongoing costs.
Yeah.
As far as upgrades and stuff.
Does that work for you, Ryan?
Yes, sir.
Great. All right, Adeline, anything else?
No, see you next month, it sounds like.
Okay. Next up is Shelby. She's going to talk to us about Deschutes County's retail theft grant program adjustment. Getting some feedback.
Okay, does that sound a little bit better?
Yes.
I apologize for that. Adelaide and I are working from the same office right now, so just a moment while we transition over our roles.
Are you waiting for the slide? Oh,
I am, yes.
okay.
Just to confirm, are you able to see that title slide there?
Mm-hmm.
Great, thank you. So good afternoon, Chair Solomon and Commissioners. For the record, my name is Shelby Grauer and I'm the grant coordinator for the Organized Retail Theft Grant Program. I'm here today to present 2 budget adjustment requests. So to begin, I will start with the Deschutes County District Attorney's Office's budget adjustment request. This budget adjustment request is before you today because it is requesting to reallocate more than 10% of their overall budget award. Specifically, they are requesting to reallocate $8,500 to increase their budget for their program manager position. The county calculated their original budget request for this position based on a project period end date of June 30th of 2025. However, the project period has since been extended to September 30th of this year. So allowing this adjustment would allow the program manager to continue their work on this project for the length of the project period as it's extended to September 30th. However, it would also still allow those team members to be able to attend upcoming meetings and trainings. Chair Solomon, I'll pause here for any discussion or question, and I do also have optional motion language if that would be helpful.
I take it their total grant award was less than 85,000?
Their total grant award, yes. I can get that number for you if you would like. It was a minimal amount. They originally started on a provisional award, and then the commission granted them a full award. So they did have a smaller budget amount that was appropriated to them.
So I just want to make a comment about some of these small adjustments that we make. I think I struggle with us having to make adjustments for nominal amounts that in one county, let's take a Multnomah County, for example, that maybe has a $2 million award. They can make adjustments internally for anything less than 200,000. But then you get to a smaller county and we're, having to go through jumping through these hoops to make really small adjustments, which I don't think is necessarily the best use of our time. And I think that staff could accommodate that. So I'm throwing this out for future conversation to think about maybe a threshold at which staff can just approve some of these small adjustment requests. So any response to that or thoughts that other commissioners might have?
Chair, if I may, Commissioner Beach, I follow your concerns and question, and I would definitely be interested in some additional discussion. Just throwing out even the base amount of justice reinvestment, for instance, at 100,000. Even that would be a $10,000 adjustment request.
Exactly.
So I would agree. It seems like we should empower the CJC staff to make these small adjustments as needed with smaller allocations and smaller grants.
Yeah, and I guess the one caveat I would add is particularly when they're within the scope of the grant, they're, just making an adjustment within, an approved area. I think it's not necessarily the best use of our time. Did you have another comment, Commissioner Norton?
That was going to be my point exactly, if it's within the scope of the already existing grant.
So Brian, is this something we could flag for future conversation?
Yes, sir. I made the note. We will work on a staff proposal maybe to this effect. The 10% threshold that currently exists was voted by the commission, preceded all of you, I believe, as members. So we will bring forward a new proposal that could be voted in as a standing order.
Great. Super. All right, back to the request at hand from Deschutes County to reallocate $8,500 for the reasons stated in this slide. Is there someone willing to make a motion to approve this request?
Commissioner Norton so moves.
Is there a second?
Commissioner McPherson seconds. Sorry.
All right. Looks like you beat him to the punch, Carl. All right, we have a motion made by Commissioner Norton, seconded by Commissioner McPherson. Jenny, roll, please.
Commissioner Beach,
Yes.
Commissioner Freeman,
Yes.
Commissioner McPherson,
Yes.
Commissioner Norton,
Yes.
Commissioner Perosa,
Yes.
and Chair Solomon.
Yes.
Passes unanimously.
All right, and I think that leaves us with Ryan for agency updates.
I do have one more
Oh, I'm
adjustment
sorry.
request from Klamath Falls Police Department, if you'd like to use that one now.
Yes, I am so sorry, Shelby. Didn't mean to pass that over.
No
Please.
Yeah, absolutely. So as I just stated, this budget adjustment request is the last of two that I have to present today. It is from the Klamath Falls Police Department and is before you today because they are also requesting to reallocate more than 10% of their overall budget award. Klamath Falls Police Department is asking to move $57,487.29 to purchase and upfit an unmarked detective's vehicle. The upfitting would include emergency lights, siren, radio, and a storage box for equipment. If approved, the funds will be reallocated as shown on the slide to include previously approved budget awards for radio and camera equipment, personnel, and police officer personnel expenses. Klamath Falls states that this vehicle will replace an existing vehicle that is nearing being unserviceable. The vehicle will be used by a major crimes detective whose responsibilities include investigating organized retail theft. They estimate that a minimum of 50% of the vehicle's use will be focused on combating organized retail theft. They would also like to utilize any unspent funds, if there are any, on the vehicle towards the purchase of a second vehicle that would also be partially utilized to combat organized retail theft investigations. Klamath Falls Police Department states that the previously budgeted funds will otherwise be unused. So Chair Solomon, I'll pause here for any discussion or questions that you may have.
So is the $57,487 the full cost of the vehicle?
It has been presented as the full cost of the vehicle to upfit and replace.
Okay, I guess I have a question about the 50% use. And funding something that isn't being used for the intended purpose in the grant. But I'll open it up to comments and discussion. Commissioner Norton.
I guess I'm curious as to why these other things, because you said it would go unspent, which meant that they didn't purchase these things. I'm curious as to why those weren't, because an automatic license plate recognition, radios, those seem relatively easy, or not easy, but simple purchases. So why weren't the funds spent on that in the first place?
Yes, Commissioner, excuse me, Commissioner Norton, that's a great question. So the grantee has notified us that those items that they previously thought would be utilized or needed for the missions are no longer needed or utilized in the way that they thought that they would when they originally presented the budget projection sheet. So now they've identified a new need instead of those.
Other comments? So Shelby, what's staff's take on the 50% of the vehicle's use being used for this purpose? It seems like we would be funding for other purposes not related to retail theft. And, you know, I want to make sure these dollars are spent as intended by the legislature on retail theft interventions.
Yes, Chair Solomon, that's a great question as well. While Klamath Falls has indicated that there would be a minimum of 50% utilized for this, they have also stated that there is the potential that it could be used beyond that 50%. They are saying that that is the minimum that they believe it would be utilized. However, it would not be the cap. So there's still the potential that it would be used more frequently than 50%.
And so is it staff's recommendation that we move forward with this request, given that?
I have not formed a recommendation on this. However, I'm happy to refer to more information and form a request or a suggestion if you would like.
Yeah, I think it would be helpful.
Okay.
I agree, Chair. This is Carl, Commissioner McPherson and I have the same concerns that you raised, and I would like more information, or otherwise I'd be a no vote at this point.
Commissioner Norton.
Yeah, so I've always got the impression that these program funds were to enhance operations, but this seems like a basic operation, like a basic need. And so my question would be, where would they be finding this vehicle otherwise? But apparently Commissioner McPherson's reading my mind today, because I am thinking along the same lines. At this point, it'd be a no, but I'd be hard pressed to push this unless you can show me that the car isn't a basic function of a law enforcement department.
Other discussion. Okay, I'm hearing a desire from commissioners to get more clarification and a recommendation from staff about, particularly related to the 50% utilization of the vehicle that we would be fully funding.
Absolutely, I'm happy to do that. I will report that back in July to you.
Great. All right. Is that it, Shelby?
That is it for me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Interim Director Keck, who's been taking on a full-time load. Yes.
Just a bit.
Mm-hmm.
But good afternoon, everybody. I have an agency update for you all. Give me a moment to get it set up here. Of course, the legislative session is not yet concluded, and I don't think they're going to make the target date of tomorrow. But I do have some slides prepared for you all. I hope they are starting to show up to talk through at least a couple of pieces that are becoming more clear for us, particularly that being our budget and House Bill 3069. So I'm seeing head nods. You see my slides?
Yep.
Great. Then I just need to get them to advance. Huh? There we go. So House Bill 5005 is CJC's budget bill for this upcoming biennium of 25-27. That has made it through the Ways and Means Committee, at least in its preliminary approval stage. It was read off of the House floor on Friday, is now going through the process to finalization. I've used the breakdown at the top to help just kind of show the path that this budget in particular has been on. You could see the line item of funding sources for our 23-25 legislative approved budget, then what was our current service level, governor's recommended, and then finally the legislative approved budget we anticipate at this stage. I want to call out, when you look at numbers like this for our budget, that it looks like a lot. It is a lot, but there is an inflated dynamic to this, because what you see in general fund is then often, and particularly this upcoming budget, duplicated in other fund. That's not to say that we got $300,000 for grants or other things between those two sources. It's that general fund dollars were appropriated to the agency and they're accounted for. And then those dollars are moved, or a good portion of those dollars are moved to other fund treasury accounts and accounted for. And so, to use a simple example like deflection, $40,000 is accounted for as general fund dollars that came in, and $40,000 is accounted for as money put into a treasury account. That doesn't make $80,000 for the deflection grant program. There's still just $40 million. Sorry, 80 million. There's 40 million. So I just want to point that out because these numbers are often confusing in that way. And even each session, there's usually a discussion to this point to help clarify that for the decision makers.
And
What-
Ryan, can you share what the I'm assuming FF is federal funds?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yeah, I apologize. I should have done that. So general fund GF, lottery fund being LF. That's a consistent amount that comes to the agency with a little bit of inflation each biennium for these are lottery funds, dedicated specifically for veteran courts. So that's what that line item is. Other fund is exactly that. These are generally other revenue streams and or these treasury accounts set up separate and distinct from the general fund for the agency. And then lastly, yes, federal funds, those being the amount that we project at the times at which we're asked of what we need limitation to spend. That's what this number reflects. And really, even that other fund, that's what that is a reflection of, is the amount we are permitted to spend out of any of these types of funding.
So let me ask a question about the federal funds. Are these dollars that are already in hand that you're getting permission to spend? Or are
Correct.
they, okay,
A combination of, but in most cases with federal, it is money already it's gone through, received, and in most cases, you all have made decisions on where it is going. But because of the changeover in the biennium, we have to seek approval to utilize those funds.
got it.
This also is all things. So within any of these buckets to include federal funds, there's operational costs associated with these dollar numbers too. This is not all just grant money that you're looking at right now.
Right.
And so I will, on the next slide, get into some of the grant funds that are anticipated to be available in this next biennium, but I wanted to call out some of the other components of our budget that were approved at this stage. We had 3 different policy option packages that related to our agency operations and different types of staffing. As you see here, we received, the majority of them were approved. In all cases, these were asks to turn positions we had here on some kind of unbudgeted or limited duration capacity into permanent staffing for the agency moving forward. And so we're happy that we received the 5 that we did, and we'll be working with the legislature on the others to continue to work on. One of those challenges at times, I'll use POP 102, for example. These are positions that we have and we support through federal funding. As such, they've always been then a limited duration approval of that use of funds and that position. I think we've established, at least with consistency, that we do receive federal pass-through dollars. And so the legislature supported the idea that these should be permanent fixtures within our organization without that every 2-year limited duration approval needed. The other package to point out that is included in this, what we anticipate in this legislative budget, is legislative package added for $850,000 for the Family Preservation Program at Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. This is a program that provides services to individuals in custody at Coffee Creek, particularly around parenting and pregnancy-related needs and education. This program has been in place for some time. CJC has provided pilot funding for the program at times, provided supplemental one-time funding at times to support the program. The legislature this go-around has decided to make that a permanent fixture of our budget to support that program within the Coffee Creek Correctional Facility. Switching to grant funds then, what I have here is a breakdown of our primary grants that you're all familiar with. And I've used 3 different columns that kind of help depict the decisions that have been made to this point. So the first column being the appropriations made to each of these grant programs for the new biennium. Second column is any dollars we might have had available to carry over into the new biennium, or where we receive funds through other means or revenue sources during a given biennium, to then give you that last column of available dollars for grants, with an asterisk, because these are still preliminary calculations for us. Not only is, of course, the nature of the approval and the signage of this bill still technically undone, but we do have to go through the procedure internally of making sure that all things are accounted for. A great example is the latest adjustment to these numbers before I brought them to you today was the fee associated with having a separate and distinct treasury account. There's a fee associated with that. So that has to come down a little bit off of the appropriation. There are other matters like that. Some programs we do need to utilize funds to support the staff to facilitate the work when it's not included in our agency budget separately. So these numbers could change in some of the grant programs, some of them being more firm, like the Justice Reinvestment number, which you all approved in a funding table earlier this afternoon. And so here you can see the breakdown. In terms of an appropriation, the program that did not receive any additional dollars was the Illegal Marijuana Market Enforcement Grant. That said, that program does already have built in a $6 million appropriation every biennium through marijuana revenue tax. And we had some carryover funds as well. So this is, as of right now, what we are operating available funds for that grant program. Same then as you see some of the combinations made in some of these areas, like jail-based medications for opioid use disorder. We received a new $6 million. We have available from monies not allocated last biennium, $4 million, bringing us to that roughly $10 million available for a new grant cycle. So I'll pause there to see if there are any questions about this.
I have a comment. One is, I'm super excited that impacts was included because that was not in the governor's recommended budget. So that is really good news. And secondly, I don't see JREP on here, and I know there's no appropriation, but I think it's worth calling out that that program was not funded. So we don't have any money, correct? There's no carryover money there, Ryan?
That's correct.
JREP.
Yeah, I wanted to make sure that one slide captured the kind of the funding, at least at this stage. We are absolutely correct on two fronts. Let me go back to impacts for a second to add that we were also informed that that will become part of our ongoing current service level budget moving forward. So impacts each biennium won't need to, I guess, like Justice Reinvestment, it will be built into our recommended budget each biennium moving forward, as opposed to a one-time funding piece. Justice Reinvestment Equity Program, unfortunately, was not built into this budget, nor given one-time funding at this time. So you're right, there are no dollars allocated for that in our current budget. That program is contracted to expire in December. And so the recipient is still utilizing the budget available to them, at least to that point in time currently. And then depending on maybe other options available through legislation, of course, there's an omnibus bill and other discussions still being had. There are other avenues that may still bring that back to the agency. But in our agency budget, as of right now, it is not included.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think the inclusion of impacts into the current service level is a huge victory because for as long as I've been around, since the inception of impacts, it's been a fight every session to get that program funded.
Correct. Commissioner Beach, did you have a question?
Thank you. So just confirming, there was no appropriation for illegal marijuana market enforcement, and I assume maybe that's because of that large $7 million carryover.
I think it was a combination. It's hard to speculate on the decisions made, but there are a combination of factors related to that program. We do have a permanent stream of funding, and I know what I guess if I would say when you look at the enterprise of state government, they're making some difficult decisions about what does and doesn't get money, and what has and does has already money or not. So I think that is a piece of it. On the opposite side of the challenge is this number is far below what we've identified ourselves through our evaluative reporting as current service level for programs like what is funded. So it is difficult. The other complicating factor is that the amount of money available for this grant program over the last several bienniums has fluctuated greatly depending on the amount of one-time contributions added to our kind of existing revenue stream. And so it has been kind of an up and down for this grant program in particular in terms of dollars.
So how is the marijuana tax revenue incorporated, or where do we see that?
So that's in that 7.6. So 6 million of that is a set number. It comes off of the top of any tax revenue. So it's not, it doesn't have the fluctuation of levels of revenue. It's a off the top calculation set at
Okay.
$6 million.
So that's not really carryover. That's $6 million for this upcoming biennium that's generated through taxes.
Correct. Yeah, I just didn't want to create
Okay.
another column for you all
Yeah,
for
yeah,
one
yeah.
thing.
No, just trying to understand it. Commissioner Beach.
Thank you, Chair. And just one more clarifying question, and forgive me, this is more educational for me. We see in the carryover other revenue of justice reinvestment formula and down. And I know that many of those grants have not yet officially closed as they're extended to September 30 or December 31. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that means simply because any unused funds by the counties are returned to the CJC and then returned to the state.
Yeah, the reason you don't see that in any of those programs is because they are currently set up as general fund grant programs, which means that at the end of the biennium, correct, what I say a county does not use, it goes directly back to the state. It doesn't return to to this agency or to that program. And so these are the amounts we've been appropriated. We don't have anything to carry forward. As we talk about House Bill 3069, there have been some changes in that bill that will make that flexibility available to these programs moving forward. And so when we get there, I can talk a little bit more about that.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to be cognizant of y'all's time. I know that we technically are scheduled till 3, but I don't know if you wanted to be here till 3. But if there's nothing else about budget, I will move to, I think my next slide is 3069.
Great.
Okay, so I'm gonna try to qualify this by saying it's a big bill. It has a lot in it. For today's purposes, I just wanted to pull out kind of some of the things that particularly were effective immediately, some of what is coming down the road, with an understanding that we will probably regularly be having conversations to help dig into what the bill does and how we will process these new directions and procedures moving forward. At this stage, we only know what we know, which is what the bill has kind of described for us and some of the timelines at which some of those things need to occur. So looking at some of the initial change, well, I'll background it for everybody. I think everybody's been following along, but what this bill does in totality is works to modernize the program, the grant programs, pardon me, for the agency. Over time, of course, we've expanded from one singular grant program back in 2005 to now 8 larger programs with a handful of other than additional programs and or sub-programs within programs. It's become quite a complicated process. There's that generated over the last few biennia feedback that made its way to the legislature about the challenges in applying for all of those and the workload and other aspects to doing a grant application for, say, in a county that wants 6 different streams of funding, doing 6 different applications to get there, all of which run different timelines, all of which decisions are made by different bodies, or different public bodies. And so from there hatched this idea of modernizing our grant program into something, at least for counties, that could be streamlined. Streamlining means that at the time at which this goes into effect in 2027, there would be 1 application for counties to apply for. Counties would choose any number of streams of dollars they would like to receive and make a request according to it. But there'd also be 1 entity then reviewing staff recommendations associated with those requests and making those decisions, and that entity being you all. From there, it's hard to say what it really will look like till we get kind of into the weeds and start thinking about it. But what is intended to come as a result of that streamlining and efficiency is more opportunity for the agency to provide assistance to the counties to bring kind of these different concepts, these different interventions in a jurisdiction together and in alignment with best practices or standards that are established or could be established. And so what it asks of counties moving forward, not now, but in the 2027 biennium, is to begin to develop what's called a biennial public safety plan to map out these different interventions. So I'm going to pause at that point to say, well, that's later. What happens right now in the spirit of this, first and foremost, is an expansion of you all as the commission. So there are currently 7 voting members for this commission. This expands that number to 9. So the commission will go from 7 voting to 9 voting. It will continue to have 2 non-voting members representing the legislature. It also adds a non-voting member representing the judicial department. So in total, we would have a commission of 12 individuals, effective immediately by statute. The other thing that is new is that how those decisions, how those membership seats are defined and how those recommendations are made to the governor's office are specified in this bill. So the colored boxes kind of reflect or summarize how those positions have been defined moving forward. The bill does have provisions that allows each of you to continue in the positions that you're in right now, and be eligible for reappointment when that time comes. But when we look at this, what we anticipate needing to do is fill in 2 particular seats at this time, that being one to represent law enforcement, either as a county sheriff or a police chief, and then someone from an academic institution with a background in criminal justice research. So we will be, once this bill is in fact signed and becomes law, we will begin the process of recruiting individuals to expand this body. As brought up earlier, the other
Brian, can
Yes, sir.
you share kind of the timeline for the appointment process? At what point would we anticipate actually bringing the new commissioners on?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know what it won't be, which is it won't be by September when the next scheduled opportunity for Senate confirmation is, because the deadline to submit those names to the governor's office is passing in 3 days. Should this say take effect on July 1 as anticipated and we began that recruitment immediately, I think there'd be a window of time we might be able to get names together and applications into the governor's office for, say, a legislative, whether it be, I guess, a legislative days kind of a convening in November or December could be that earliest opportunity. Otherwise, it's likely to fall into short session in 2026 before we would have somebody Senate confirmed and be able to join you in an active capacity.
Great, thank you.
Pardon me. As alluded to earlier, the other thing that takes effect immediately is the creation of these individual treasury accounts for any grant program that didn't already have one. And so justice reinvestment, as well as treatment courts and retail theft, all are created at this point forward to have one of those other fund accounts. They, again, kind of the budget magic that happens as the appropriations made, and then there's a portion then put into that account for sake of grant making. We'll be able to do that now, this biennium. What that provides us is the flexibility, like you saw in that budget breakdown for some other grant programs, where at the back end of the upcoming biennium, if there are unspent or unallocated funds in any of our grant programs, we'd be able to identify that and make the request to have that carried over and added to the available grant funds for a subsequent biennium.
And so you can't do that if there isn't a treasury account set up?
Not without a pretty arduous process to get there and submit kind of a different justification process than through another fund account.
Great.
Yeah, and so it should provide more flexibility. I know we often hear and you all feel the concerns about sustainability with programs when programs are kind of have hard deadlines in which they need to be over. That's the other piece that allows us to do is even if we're uncertain of, say, new funding for a program, we can at least stretch the dates on a contract to try to fill the void when it's appropriate to do so. Lastly, then, or highlighting, I guess, some changes that will take effect immediately to these two grant programs, deflection as well as retail theft, which I have on more detail on next slides. So starting with deflection, the primary or the first change, I guess, that takes effect or would take effect upon signage is that the responsibility to make those grants will fall to you all. Currently, that decision is made by the Impacts Grant Review Committee, which Commissioner Solomon and McPherson sit on as a part of a larger body. This bill transfers that authority to this commission. So awards that will be made based on the distribution schedule I'll discuss here in a moment will be decisions made by you all for this biennium of 25-27. Summarizing then the other changes to this program that take effect immediately is how the dollars are distributed. So again, previously, with the grant award created in 2024, all funds for counties were distributed based on the Oversight and Accountability Council associated with burn funding, administered and are overseen by the Oregon Health Authority. And so that was done by a formula after determining a set aside for tribal governments. The set aside for tribal governments maintains as a kind of step one that this right, you all as the commissioners now will have to make a determination of how much to set aside. And then what is remaining for counties is distributed in accordance with this breakdown here. The first 25% for this biennium, and I'll come back to that. This biennium will be distributed along that same formula that we utilized last year. So that same OAC formula and how it breaks down dollars. I guess the point of the highlight for the 2024 date there is that we would utilize what we used last time. The OAC formula did change between last year and now. We've been directed right by statute to use the one previously identified. So we would use the same one, which was calculated and elevated with a floor amount like what we used, that we would replicate with new dollars for these 25% of funds to counties. I'm going to bounce to the bottom to say that, well, I guess 70% of the funds available to counties then need to be distributed according to a new projections formula that will be developed by CJC. The bill also specifies how we get to that, and we're still working through and trying to develop a process to do so. So I don't have a lot of detail for you, but what the bill asks us to do is for the agency to provide historical data to the county, for the county to determine a projection on both its eligible population, so that might include who and how many people have been arrested for PCS or eligible crimes based on their program criteria. Also a projection on how many of that eligible population they anticipate could be or would be enrolled in a deflection program based on their exclusionary criteria or other aspects defined by the county for their deflection program. And then that information is returned to CJC to calculate or create a projection-based formula according to that or based on that. The simplest way to describe that is the idea is at this stage, the counties have the opportunity to make a projection based on how many people they intend to or expect to serve based on how they've defined their program for themselves. And that's what feeds a formula. So once we pull all of these county projections together, of course, for those that are participating, we would be able to see, okay, this number from county X is roughly, I don't know what, 5% of the total. This number from county Y is 20% of the total. We would use some version far more mathy and complicated than that to come up with a formula, projections-based formula. The last little bit of this money, which is specific to the funds available to county, is 5% retained for data collection and technical assistance to continue to keep collecting and analyzing data related to deflection and, of course, provide assistance to counties as they continue to roll these programs out, and in particular in accordance with standards as they get established. Sorry, sir.
So with the 70%, does that set the funding formula for the full biennium, or is it for the first year? And then I thought there was a piece where you kind of evaluate after the first year. Is that how you
Yeah,
understand? Yeah.
yes. Let's uncouple a bit. The evaluation I think you're thinking about is in relation to the public safety plan and changes to 3069 that come into effect in 2027.
Got it. Okay.
For deflection, starting here in 2025, there are just these two parts of the appropriate or the allocation that would be made to a county for this biennium.
Okay. And previously, was there a 5% holdback for TA and data analysis, or is this an increase for the agency?
It is an increase. Previously, it was an up to 3% authority for the count or for the agency, pardon me, to use. This is now a 3% shall retain for deflection or data collection, and 2% shall be retained for technical assistance.
Okay.
And then the note there, in 2025, right, or this 25-27 biennium, a recipient cannot receive less than 300,000 kind of through this process. So there's kind of two parts to how you get to a number, but that total number received can't be less than 300,000 for any recipient. So if I haven't confused you enough, now we could step into the next new future. And again, I've tried to keep this high level for, I'm mistakenly. Changes to the retail theft grant do take effect immediately as well. The retail theft grant, organized retail theft grant, makes these changes here. Previously, the Oregon State Police was identified as an eligible recipient, as were community-based organizations was the term used, the intention being those asset protection type organizations that help and support these investigations or prosecutions. This go around, both of those as recipients are removed, and in place is the Oregon Department of Justice to provide additional assistance or support to these types of operations. They also then defined equipment as a specified and eligible expense with the definition that's included here on the slide. So those become the added criteria to this grant program as we do the 25-27 solicitation and approval process for that grant. So, okay. Now to briefly talk about changes for 27-29. So we're looking way ahead and even further out of what details we actually have in front of us right now. But what we know is that this consolidated grant application process it will be put into effect for the 27-29 biennium. Counties that apply underneath what's called this Public Safety Coordination Grant, which includes the 4 grant programs you see in blue beneath it on the diagram here. That grant, or I should say, application for this mega grant, which includes requests for any of those individual grant dollars or programs, has the requirement to submit a biennial public safety plan. That plan is, again, we need to do some work to figure out exactly what that looks like, what the minimum requirements are for that submission. But in statutes, it's defined as a plan associated with the county's efforts and interventions to reduce involvement in the criminal justice system in particular. That plan, to what you spoke to, Chair, is what then has to be evaluated by the agency twice during a grant cycle. So after awards, roughly a year in, we would do a progress check-in to evaluate how the county is doing, how that plan is coming, not coming along, I guess, but whether they're meeting the goals they've expressed in that plan, whether or not the programs have been implemented as intended as part of that plan, with then a final evaluation at the end of the biennium. that evaluation becomes important to not only informing counties and use of that current grant, but then what will be considered as we move to then say a subsequent biennium and review. So I think the idea is that this becomes something that is, of course, changes over time with the needs of local jurisdictions, but is designed to have probably not intended to maybe always be done in 2 years, right? A public safety plan often is more aspirational with maybe some benchmark goals as efforts are made to achieve certain outcomes and or avoid costs in other metrics. The metrics then have to be developed at this stage, so it's difficult to get too far into the weeds on that. It does say the metrics will be specified by the agency. We know that each grant program has varying levels of or different types of metrics that I think naturally become part of that process. Specialty courts or treatment courts, pardon me, as an example, have established standards. We've established a scorecard with metrics to evaluate how that particular program is doing in accordance with those standards. It seems only natural that in a larger public safety plan that would include a treatment court or two, that become part of the evaluation of that plan and the programming that funding supports. So a lot to figure out over time as it relates. I wanted to point to the diagram for you all too to say this also changes at the last bullet you see noted the justice reinvestment and the impacts grant programs in particular that have their own established grant review committees by statute. Come 2027, those would be dissolved, and the decision making would be more of a direct communication between staff's analysis and you all for those grant programs in 2027 as well. So this year, right now, we're in the middle of it, for example, with Justice Reinvestment, and we have the Justice Reinvestment Grant Review Committee that is reviewing applications and requests and make recommendations to you all later this fall. In 2027, it will just be staff's review and analysis presented to you all for decision making. And same would go for impacts, which to date, with the exception of 2 commissioners, has no one has that involvement on this body, but will moving forward.
But Ryan, excuse me. I thought the impacts was going away right away. The deflection part of impacts.
Yeah, correct.
So the grant review committee for the regular impacts will be in effect till 27.
Correct. Technically till July 1, 2026, is when the operative date is put in place. So okay. The Impacts Grant Review Committee will make the decisions as it relates to the new appropriation of $10 million for the impacts grants in 25-27.
Okay.
You all will pick up from there in 27-29.
So by 27, will there be any grant review committees in existence?
Not for county applications.
Okay.
There will be a review, at least one established grant review or grant advisory committee in place as a result of the Restorative Justice Grant Program. That's why I also wanted to point you to this diagram. These new consolidated grants are to specific applicant types. So the Public Safety Coordination Grant is specific for counties who are applying for justice reinvestment, treatment court, deflection, or impacts. Impacts is a great example. As a grant, it's also available to tribal governments. And so the counties will apply through this consolidated grant process if they are seeking impact funds. Tribes seeking impacts funds will need to submit through a different process, still being determined by you all, but separate and distinct to just impacts. Mm-hmm. Restorative Justice is an example of a grant program we facilitate that's not included in any of these consolidated grants. So it will continue as is, as an established program. Whatever budget comes to it each biennium, we would go through a process. They do have a grant advisory committee in place that would continue to make the initial approvals and submit them to you all for authorization.
Commissioner Veach?
Thank you, Chair. Ryan, forgive me, this is just, there's a lot of content in here. And I understand there to be a standing grant review committee for the treatment courts, but those will no longer be in existence either. And I just clarify because the last bullet point doesn't mention the treatment court grant review committees.
Yeah, and I should specify, I put the bullet there to speak to the statutorily defined grant review committees. The Treatment Court Grant Committee, the Illegal Marijuana Grant Review Committee, these are all committees that we've stood up as an agency to help and support the process, but there's no statutory establishment of them. But I think as practice, we will likely bring all grants to that same place, which is that staff will take in applications, staff will do an analysis and present the recommendations to you all. So in effect, yes, there would no longer be a treatment court grant review committee.
Thank you.
Ryan, I think as you described this to me previously, that by consolidating this work and not having to staff all of these different grant review committees, you're going to free up significant staff time that could be used to provide more direct support to counties.
That is exactly the intent. Staff will probably shoot me on my way out of my office here to say, if I don't say that initially it is going to be very difficult. There's a lot to figure out here. There's a lot of moving parts, and I don't think it's going to feel like it, change things for the better in the immediate. I think that's fair to evaluate or establish on the onset. Longer term, once we've figured out these metrics, once we have a process in place, once you all have become familiar with how you operate in these new spaces, I think that was when we will really start to kind of be able to leverage those efficiencies in the way that you described and meet that intent, which is that we're able to do more time kind of after the grant season and in the other, the back half of a biennium to be in the communities and helping with data collection, with best practices, with other types of technical assistance. But it's gonna take a while to get there. We'll do our best, of course. We're always focused on trying to be engaged with our recipients, but it'll take us a while to establish it first.
Right.
So, well, as quick as I can, or I'm allowed, I'll speak to in 2027, then there are changes made again to deflection, as well as some changes to adjusted reinvestment that are worth highlighting at a high level right now. So everything I described to you for 25-27 with deflection, in some ways changes for 27-29. So in that next biennium, the number percentages are the same, but now the 25% that's distributed is based on that projection formula that we're working to build out this biennium. So we're creating it and piloting it now, and it'll be used to distribute 70%. In the future, that formula would be used to distribute just 25%. So step one of this, say, evolution of deflection based on legislative intent is to allocate dollars based on the size of programs. And so we built in and are utilizing that. And so that becomes kind of the baseline, if you will, in 2027-9 to be a portion of funding based on the anticipated size of that program, how many people are intended to be served. And as such, then the floor is capped or is associated with that calculation, and it is brought back down to the previous minimum award of $150,000. So 25% to a jurisdiction based on the projected size of that program with no less than $150,000. The other 70% of available funds, again, just for counties, a predetermined set aside would be made for tribal governments. The remaining 70%, or 70% of it, would be based on a competitive process. So this is where then legislative intent is to transition towards programs that are performing best, receive the dollars. And so there is a list of priorities in the bill. I did not include them on a slide here. We can maybe do that in a future discussion. But a list of priorities identified to utilize to help structure a competitive process. So there's baseline funding based on the projected size of a program, but the bulk of funding is based on the quality and the performance of the program beginning in 27 and moving forward if no changes are made. Lastly, then I will speak to Justice Reinvestment in 2027. So again, for you all, as well as anybody listening from the public, 25-27 will be as we normally experience with some of those modifications you approved to competitive grants today. In 2027, Justice Reinvestment becomes a three-part or three streams of funding that can be requested. The traditional Justice Reinvestment Formula stream, which is associated with reducing recidivism and use of prison. What we've called a competitive grant to this point, but we've focused on supplemental funding for downward departure diversion. That would be a second stream. And then what is already in existence as a grant facilitated by the Department of Corrections, brought from Measure 57, focused on treatment for folks with substance use disorder. That grant falls or is brought into the fold of Justice Reinvestment beginning in 2027 as well. So it'll be three streams of money to be applied for with their individual purposes by a county in 2027. From there, the methodology for distribution. First is the 10% victim service provision piece that has been in place for some time on both of our existing two streams of JRP funding. Now extends to three streams of JRP funding in 27. That's 10%. 15% then of the remaining funds are set aside for supplemental funding. I will come back to that, but for supplemental funding at a later date. And then the remainder is distributed in accordance with the grant and aid formula as it's been. One piece there that is different is that now the formula will be applied to all three of those streams. So a county that applies for, prison use reduction, downward departure diversion, and treatment for a supervised population, right? All three of these streams, the amount they get for each of them would be based on a formula. There'd be no competitive component to that. In 2027. And as it continues, I guess, as is, the up to 3% may be retained by CJC for statewide outcome evaluations. Coming back to the incentive, this ties us all the way back to those public safety plans. And I know we're real short on time, but just to say that this money is intended to be set aside with the idea that once a plan is evaluated and found to be, I guess, in good standing, a county unlocks this 15% set aside and can then utilize it to address any public safety priority that's part of that plan. So it converts from Justice Reinvestment dollars to public safety dollars in a jurisdiction upon approval of the plan's performance, I guess, or evaluation of a plan's performance.
And those dollars would get unlocked at the end of the biennium, right?
That is correct. So it becomes almost like a bonus added to whatever that next biennium's allocation is.
And I got a quick question about the 3%. When you say it may be retained by the CJC, will the counties still have the ability to hold back or apply for their 3% for research?
Potentially. I think that's, as we work to develop this process, that's one of those questions to check in, I think, with the counties, you all, and other interested parties to find out the best way to utilize it. Statutory language does provide flexibility. My understanding anyway, 10, 12 years ago, the decision was made and how we've processed it for some time. Mm-hmm. I think that's another area of discussion as we develop this program as to what would be the best way to utilize that. And in some cases, it isn't up to and may retain. So it does have flexibility to make a determination. I'm going to say hypothetically, maybe you all agree to just do 1% for one particular purpose to serve the state, and the rest goes back in a bucket. I think there's a lot to explore there.
Okay, great.
With 1 minute to spare, that's it.
That's it. Are you sure? All right. Any questions? And I know we'll be revisiting much of this in greater detail. Really appreciate you giving us an overview, Ryan. But any quick questions, Commissioner Norton?
Not really quick questions, but things we need to consider relatively quickly is that we usually meet once a month, right? And so it's gonna be here before we know it. So planning that transition sooner rather than later is exciting to me. Although I am gonna be sad about giving up my JRP seat because that's one of my favorite programs. So
Great. Commissioner Beach?
Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate your comments, Chair, about there being the potential for additional discussion. And of course, our director talking about all the planning that we anticipate. You know, I will just share, I would be remiss if I didn't put officially on the record as a representative of OACCD, our Adult Community Corrections Directors, there's a great deal of trepidation with regard to how this might play out. And I'm thinking of, you know, the writers of the grants, so to speak. That typically smaller counties, and I'll just speak for Yamhill County, we don't have internal grant writers, and all of those grants, justice reinvestment, competitive formula, we have 3 treatment court grants. I am the administrator and writer of all those grants. And so I think there's just a great deal of trepidation about the workload. And that being said, in expectation of a $61 million cut to general allotment from the state to community corrections. So then seeing these 3 formulas with justice reinvestment, competitive supplemental, and the now measure 57 officially coming into one line of funding and then immediately getting 28% ticked off the top of that. So I just wanted to express the concerns of my peers and my counterparts about what exactly this will look like. And I do look forward to additional discussions here with the commission as well as with our Commissioner CJC director, and do hope that OACCD will be part of those discussions with regard to what that plan looks like moving forward, because that will be a great deal of work on our parts in particular. So thank you very much for the time. I know we're over time, so thank you.
Great. Any other last comments? All right. Well, thank you, Director Keck and staff. Appreciate everybody's work and attention. It's pretty rare that we go right up to 3 o'clock, so thank you for staying with us. And we are officially adjourned till next month. Take care.
Thank you all.